Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and as always, I thank you so much for joining us here on the program because I find these programs fascinating. I mean, yes, many of them are my own therapy. I've said that on many occasions. Many of them I'm interested in the subject matter, like as I've said before. It sounds kind of weird to say it this way, a subject that's near and dear to my heart, death and dying. No, I have not had a near-death or out-of-body experience, but the conversation has always intrigued me. And then there is the subject of aliens and other life on other worlds and so forth, other than our own. I've often said that, hey, it's the height of arrogance of humanity to think that we're the only ones in the universe, and I don't care what the ecumenical sea said back hundreds or thousands of years ago that we are the center of the universe, because I don't buy it. It just doesn't make logical sense. We're going to kind of touch on some of those today with our very special guest. She is joining us on Zoom, and Debbi Dachinger is our guest here on the program. She has her own podcast. It's an award-winning podcast called Dare to Dream that kind of touches upon many of these subjects, like extraterrestrials, channeling, UFOs, shamanism, cutting-edge spirituality, and so forth. And I want to welcome you to our program. It's really a pleasure to have you here because, like I said, I'm fascinated by this stuff.
Me too, Richard. And the deeper I get into it, the more there is. I mean, if you love learning and exploring and finding out truth about things, this is like the greatest rabbit hole. And I think what's really cool about all of this information is you can sort of pick and choose. There's people out there who love conspiracy theories. I'm very careful personally with that because that's a little too dark for me. And I need more proof. And then there's the folks who, there's just unbelievable amounts of information on different alien races and galaxies and our connection to them and DNA and humans and how we all intersect. So thank you for having me on. And I love all of this too.
Yeah. I'm actually annoyed by conspiracy theories. Because it's like, first of all, and I think it might have been Carl Sagan. I saw this quote by him about talking with and arguing belief. You have a fool for a debater. If you debate someone about their belief, because a belief isn't based in fact, it's based upon what they believe, and that can change. And I still remember something I said to my late eldest sister, and it was at Thanksgiving time in the kitchen while my mother was fixing Thanksgiving dinner. Wrong place and wrong time, but nonetheless. And she was concerned about my salvation. Now, I was born and raised Catholic, and I have been a metaphysician probably since the age of 17. And I said, well, my beliefs of yesterday are not my beliefs of today, are not my beliefs of tomorrow, because I'm still alive. I'm still experiencing. I'm still growing. I'm changing. I'm learning. I'm reading. I'm talking to people. And what I believed yesterday, I don't know if I'll still believe that today. But by the same token, when I'm asked, for example, by some, so what's after this life? I have to tell them I don't know. But what I believe is that there has to be something else after this, because it doesn't make any sense that we go through all of that we go through in this life, and then it's lights out. By the same token, if it's lights out, I'm not going to know. So, that's what I believe. I don't know this for a fact. So that's kind of where I'm at when it comes to those kinds of conversations with conspiracy theories. I find it fascinating, Debbi, that you have kind of taken this on, especially in a podcast. As far as extraterrestrials, I haven't really focused on it much over the 15 plus years that we've been doing this program, and the 45 years I've been interviewing, just because it didn't really interest me. But my wife made the comment, and I would love your take on this, because we touched upon this shortly before we started. She says, we can't be indigenous to this planet. If you take a look at all of the other creatures that live here, they all live in environments that sustain them. But man chooses to live all over the place and has to build structures to house them in terms of protecting them from the elements, clothing for the same purposes. They have to live in areas where they can grow what they need or find what they need in terms of food and clean water in order to sustain their lives. And quite honestly, it's the only species on the planet that is mucking all of that up. What are your thoughts? Do you think we're indigenous or not, or do you what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with your wife and with some of your curiosities that we're an amalgam of many things. 450,000 years ago, the Anunnaki came to this planet and they were considered gods because of the way they looked and the kind of powers they had. And so we considered them deities. They wanted to mine for gold, specifically in Africa on Earth. And in order to do so, they needed a labor race. And humans at that time in history would never have acquiesced to something like this. We were 12-strand DNA. And so the Anunnaki took it upon themselves, and this is a very dark thing they did. They took it upon themselves to alter human DNA. And they caused our DNA to go down to 2-strand so that we would be willing to become a labor race and mine the gold for them. Now it backfired because whereas we had lived for over 100 years with great health, and we were very different, by the way, looking than what we are right now, we started to not live long. Our longevity was cut short. Women were dying in childbirth. People were getting all sorts of health issues. And so we had some benevolent races come to our rescue. And specifically, we had the felines, the reptilians, the bird people, and also the high light beings, meaning light beings, high dimensional beings of Lyra, right? The lion planet come. And knowing what the Anunnaki had done, and by the way, the Anunnaki were recalled. There are good and dark Anunnaki. And so the good Anunnaki who knew, hey, Earth is a planet of choice, of free will. You can't do this to these people. So they were recalled, and then these beautiful benevolent races came and gave us some of their genetic material. This is part of why many of us look so incredibly different, feature-wise, tall-wise. I mean, you consider Mayan people, African people, Asian people, white Nordic people, and every spectrum, right, across the board. So we were born with different proclivities, and our DNA is absolutely a mixture. And I'll just go a step further to say that Francis Crick, who is the scientist who discovered DNA and also won a Nobel Prize for his work, said in a quote that human genetics, human DNA material is so complex, it is impossible that it is merely human. It is clear that it is showing some interference from extraterrestrial sources.
Hmm. Interesting. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, and then this is just my rudimentary understanding of DNA. The DNA that each of us has, number one, though there's a general similarity in the human race, Homo sapien, each person has its own his or her own unique DNA. However, it is nothing more than information. And that information is used as the building blocks of who we are as individuals. It is said that it is possible to alter that DNA for whatever purposes one would like, as well as, and I'm sure you've heard of this technology called CRISPR, where they've actually been able to modify the DNA specifically, and this was something that was shown in I think it was a 60 Minutes piece, to eliminate sickle cell anemia from an individual. And the first thing that went through my mind was, okay, so what are the unintended consequences? What? Yeah, you got rid of this, but with that change comes what are referred to as unintended consequences. Talk to us a little bit about the messing around with, if you will, our that information, that code that makes us who we are.
It's so important, this conversation. And there are even physical conditions that people still have because of what happened. There are things when you consider cancer, when you consider arthritis, when you consider some of these bizarre strains of diseases that people get. So we've never fully come back online, so to speak, because of the manipulation of our genetics. And I will also say that thank God for the benevolent beings that did give us our beautiful DNA. So let me go a little bit to right now. As you probably know, there's been a lot of, throughout history, there's been a lot of often an abduction. The reason why someone is abducted, let me be clear, first is because their soul agreed to it, even if it is terrifying. It is so important for them to get help around it. And there's so many people who help and do hypnotherapy and have groups to assist, therapists to assist. But their soul ultimately agreed in this life to be part of that program. And if they're part of that program, they're often having genetic material extracted from them because of the hybrid program. There are already existing races out in other galaxies that are using part human DNA and another. So, for example, the Sasanis, right? They're part Zeta Reticuli and they are part human. And so they are building these advanced races. They love using human DNA because of our propensity and ability to love, to feel, and to be resilient. And many of the other extraterrestrials do not have these characteristics. So there are many benevolent races. They love us because we're family and they know and resonate with our DNA. And so there's the piece where we get sick with the manipulation, where we don't live as long as we used to, although it's getting better and better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Human longevity and aging better and better because of science and medicine and all of that. And it could be better. Then there's the piece that I find really interesting, which is I understand that originally we would all look like Bigfoot. We would all look like Sasquatch. That's who we were before this manipulation and changing of the strands happened. Can you imagine? So, yes, they came, the Anunnaki, and messed around with what we had genetically, and we became these new hominids. And it's fascinating,
Mm-hmm.
really fascinating. But now we look like we do. And then there's even, you might know people, and I find this part, if anybody's ever had their galactic history done, and I have, and I can in fact even show you a picture. I just received a phenomenal picture from an artist, a really well-known artist, who will do a channel drawing of a galactic aspect of you. And I just received it the other night, and I'm mad for it. But you can also look at people and see some of their genetics. You might see bird person, or you might see bear person. You might see, like in my case, lion person, and so forth. So sometimes those genetics are very strong and they even appear in our human form.
Mm. So one of the other aspects of this, which is also interesting, in our science fiction realm, is stories that we hear, you know, about using this particular technology of altering the DNA. And you may or may not be familiar with this episode of the science fiction series Star Trek Next Generation, And what was interesting was there's a new series called Discovery where they actually, in this, I think it's their final season, they're actually dovetailing off of that story. And this is the story basically. There was one scientist who was gathering DNA from different parts of the galaxy because he had this, I don't know if he had a theory or he had read it in some ancient wisdom teachings that everybody, all of the different species, Romulan, Klingon, et cetera, were all connected.
Wow.
So eventually, the Enterprise and Picard and his crew got involved, and they started doing the same thing. And the spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to tell you, they wound up on the planet, this particular planet's surface, where they had this last strand of DNA that they needed to get, and they were inputting it into their tricorder. And once they did, it materialized this hologram of this humanoid individual who began to explain that very fact. All of you are connected. You're all part of the same species, shall we say, in a general sense. I mean, because they're all bipedal, they're all humanoid in shape, even though the Klingons got a lumpier head than the Romulans and so forth. And now they're doing the same thing with the Discovery series, where now they're starting to look at this again. And this is like 600 years into Next Generation's future. 600 years. And only now they're diving into this all over again. And we're connected. Whether, I mean, there's almost a part of it, Debbie, where we're connected in a manner of speaking, whether we like it or not, right?
These shows, by the way, are so spooky. You know, these people are so tapped in. They are downloading some kind of something because movies, there's tons of movies, Interstellar.
Oh, that was cool.
Man,
That
we
was
just
cool.
watched it again for a second time. And, starting with Ray Bradbury and yes, Gene Roddenberry, there are stories, by the way, that there was a secret society, including some JPL scientists and other very high level beings connected with space and science and in the know, things they could not disclose. And they used to meet, this very intimate group. And many people contend that's where Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek, originator of Star Trek, got his information. This was based on real facts. So when you say this, it is spooky, it's synchronistic. I think it's a delicious way for all of us to get that. And I also really like it, Richard, because media, not all, clearly, because what you're describing, that's very benevolent and educational and fun, sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Although not maybe, science fiction, maybe science real. I would say there's also a lot of media, The Day the Earth Stood Still and all these like really scary movies that frighten people
Mm-hmm.
about aliens. So I like to hear about shows that actually show us living as part of the galactic community and doing so and proclaiming that we're all connected because this is truth.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other element of it too is, taking those different ones like War of the Worlds and, The Day the Earth Stood Still. By the way, I never did see the original one, but I love the one with Keanu Reeves. Um, if these entities, I'll use that generic term, if these entities were really bent on subjugating us and so on, right? And they can travel intergalactically, it would have been done by now. You and I wouldn't even be having these conversations. There has to be some law or rule or something that has basically said, we will not interfere with events on Earth.
That is correct. I just want to take a pause there and say,
Please.
again, we are a people of choice, a people of free will, and they know it. And there is only one time they have ever and will ever interfere. Outside of that, they will not, but they watch all the time. And the
Mhm.
only time they have interfered in history is about nuclear. And there have been many accounts when a government was on a phone with somebody in a nuclear facility and they had their hand on the button and they may have even pushed that button. And all of a sudden, the nuclear was disarmed
Mm.
and they saw spacecraft. So there's been a number of occasions where this has happened, where it's been documented, and extraterrestrials. I engage often on my show with people who channel extraterrestrials, really well-known people, and it's incredible information. But they've said over and over, this is the one reason, because it would not just implode and impact our planet, it would also do so out in the cosmos. So many species and planets and galaxies would be impacted by our foolery. So that's it. Other than that, nope, they don't interfere, but they're watching and they are getting ready to connect more deeply.
We're talking with Debbi Dachinger. DebbiDachinger.com is the website. I'm going to give you that website, spell it out for you because you'll be able to go there. We'll be linked to that website too, by the way, Debbie, so people can go straight there. DebbiDachinger. That's DebbiDachinger.com. I want to shift gears a little bit because another area that I find so fascinating is shamanism. My understanding, as you have shared, is that you are, so to speak, on the on the path of
Yes.
becoming.
I'm a certified shamanic
Oh,
practitioner.
you are
Yes.
there now. You
And
have.
also a Munai rights practitioner. And I just finished animal spirit medicine. And yeah, I am deep on the path, Richard. That's 100% correct. And I am impassioned about shamanism and its ability to heal people, the earth, and all of us, right? I feel it has a lot of secrets.
Now we have a little bit of a paradox, I think, and maybe you can help me to demystify this a little bit because you made the comment earlier about people who are abducted, and I know I'm going back into that realm, but the comment you made was that okay, maybe they signed on, the contract said this is what I want to experience. Okay. Um, so why should we even bother? Because this is just part of our contract. And yet I've also been told on this program by others, yeah, you did sign that contract. However, it wasn't written in stone. You can actually, as someone said to me, using the metaphor of a script, says, yeah, that's the script that you agreed to, but that doesn't mean that you have to keep it that way. You can rewrite your own script. Is that your understanding?
Yes, this doesn't have anything to do with shamanism. This is
No,
back
no,
to the
no. I understand.
yeah, and when you talk about abductions, so it's twofold. We have choice, and I have heard many people, I know people who've been abducted, and it is your will. So if something is about to happen, and this is not okay with you while before it is happening, people have said no aboard a spacecraft to a species, and those species have always honored them. But that no, just like in this life as a human, very important to have a boundary. Now, that said, these are actually separate but somewhat connected. There are a lot of cases of people who are traumatized, but then worked through it. And I think Whitley Strieber is a very famous and perfect example. And anyone who remembers his earlier books like Communion, personally, I was super young when I read them, and I was terrified at the time of the idea of extraterrestrial anything, because that's what I thought they were. Little gray men who were going to show up in the middle of the night. You were paralyzed. They could do whatever they wanted to you. You came back and you clearly had massive PTSD. And I just thought, I don't want any part of that. However, and I give Whitley so much credit that he has over the decades, because he is still deeply in contact with extraterrestrials,
Hmm.
but in a very different way now. I mean, now they come to him and say, Whitley, it is time to meditate. Whitley, we're going to, I mean, it's almost like this wisdom school that they do. Like it's our podcast, what you and I do, on crack. And so he loves it. And he has beautiful relationship with them today, but it took him time to understand what was happening, to work it out, to come to terms and to peace with it, and to navigate into a two-way street. They definitely get something from him as a human and their connection, and he really gets something from them.
Well, like I said before, if they are able to travel the way that they do and so forth, um, there's nothing we can do about it. They're going to do what they're going to do. And if they were not benevolent, all right, we wouldn't be having these conversations. And that to me is I think that that's something that's extremely important for people to keep in mind, that you cannot you can't hold. This is the other aspect of it too. And I know that again, we're still talking about
Mhm.
extraterrestrials. That's
It's
all right though.
fascinating.
That's all right. It is. I find it fascinating, and I made this observation back in the late 80s, early 90s, when the Cold War came to an end. And I thought, oh, wonderful. We don't have any more enemies. I mean, we can finally
Uh,
relax a little bit, right? Well, apparently, the powers that be said, no, 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 no. There's a vacuum. We got to fill the vacuum. And so, who did we choose? The Arab world. And in the 21st century, we still had the Arab world, but then we added to it China and Korea and Iran. And these were all quote unquote old enemies, but we started to lump them all together saying, okay, we need to, bolster up our weaponry and da 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 da. And it's like, it seems like, and maybe you think this might be in our DNA. It's been altered in that fashion to where it's like we have to have an enemy. We can't
it's such a
seem
good
to go
question.
through life without having some kind of thing like that.
Wow. It is a perfect question. I was literally just reading, I'm putting together a report about star seeds right now. And so I'm also doing a ton of research because I want people to have an idea where they're from. They can look at their characteristics and start to see themselves in these other star beings and understand that there are our star brothers and sisters. We are not separate. And so, in reading about it, one of the things I came pattern wise to see is when for instance, the Anunnaki are just a great example, but there's many of them out there. The Dracos are another great example. Like they can be a dark race, they're a warring race. I mean, they're built like, oh, these are warrior type built beings.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't want to mess with them when you're on their side. They're bros, right? It's like this bro council, but you can't cross the line with them. And sometimes the darker forces, when they want what they want, they'll get it and not by nice means. So, isn't that interesting for somebody who might have some Draco DNA or connection that in a past/concurrent life, that they are also that? So that said, then you could go to the very benevolent, peace-loving races like the Avians and Lyrians, the Pleiadians, the Octurians. There's many of them out there. And so, what we have when we realize that we're family is we possess selflessness and selfishness, and it plays out all over the world stage. And it goes even micro as people behave in the world. You could be the greatest person and so giving and patient, and then watch out if you're on the freeway and you're flipping people off or, cutting people off in line, trying to get something, or cheating somebody stealing. I mean, there's so many ways it shows up. Breaking up with somebody and ghosting them and not having, communication skills. These things are not good. They're not helping, they're not contributing. And so overall, this plays out to see where are we still so greedy, corporate greed,
Mm.
country greed, situational greed, personal greed, and then where we are so giving and patient and a contribution. And really, for us to get where we need to, humanity wise, everybody knows we're at a crossroads, right? And
Yeah.
this is where shamanism comes in. Shamanism comes in twice here. The first place shamanism comes in is, first of all, they have been working with extraterrestrials since the beginning of time, and they have an ongoing relationship. So this conversation wouldn't happen in an indigenous tribe, right? This is just part of their life. And second of all, um, I lost that second of all, and hopefully that'll come back. But you get my point with the first one.
Hmm.
They're already deeply connected. They're aware of, did they come from the Pleiades? Did they come from, and they know who their people are out in the galaxy. And they hold the key shamanically. The second point is they know how to get us to healing humanity, to healing the earth, because we are at a crossroads.
Hmm.
Everybody knows it. This is why people are anxious out there, because they can feel we need to make other choices. And if I may just say one more thing, there's two beautiful pieces to this. There's a shaman, Peruvian specifically, prophecy that talks about right now. And it's not just a prophecy, it's happening. And then there was a miracle, literally a miracle that just happened days ago that I would love to share.
Hmm. Please.
Okay. So these all connect. And I think right now, what people really need is hope, not false hope, but really to understand more of what's going on. So I will
Yeah.
say, the Peruvians, the Inca lineage, which is what I'm part of and what I study, there is something they called the Pachacuti prophecy. And Pacha, as many people know, the word Pachamama, which stands for earth, Pacha does stand for earth, but it also is a Quero word meaning time. And Pachacuti means a time to right things. And so they speak of every 500 years, there's another Pachacuti. We're deep into this Pachacuti right now. And the Pachacuti speaks and says that everything's going to go chaotic. Things are going to be shaken up. People are going to be dying and leaving the earth. Things are going to be revealed about governments. Wars are going to happen. All the ugly underbelly is going to come up. Why? To heal. It is just like if you took a crystal ball or a snow globe and you shook it, and it looks kind of bananas when it's upside down, but it's chaotic. And it's only done so that when you write it up, the beautiful snow comes down.
Mm.
And that's the time we're heading into, the time of hope, the time when everything goes right, the rise of the divine feminine, when there is finally balance again with the feminine and the masculine, meaning we're not going to work so hard, do so much activity, be so busy that we neglect ourselves, our families, our health, and everything else. And that we start to feel more, be more, and reciprocate more. This is where the healing is going to come from. Getting in touch with Pachamama, with Mother Earth, respecting her, loving her, seeing all the amazing things she gives. And then here's the miracle. This is very important. I loved that this happened. And let me tell you, the Native American people are going a little bit happy crazy right now. So on February 25th, this year, 2024, in Kansas, there was a white buffalo that was born. And it is very rare. And the Native people, the Comanches, the Lakota people, it is part of their prophecy, also the Navajo. And they all say, this is beautiful, this white buffalo. It is a sign of things changing in the world and better times coming. And even the National Bison Association said, this is a rare event. There's only 1 in 10 million chance that a white buffalo will ever be born. So this white buffalo is a symbol of hope. It's an honoring of what's sacred, a reminder to connect whatever you do spiritually, I don't care as long as you have a connection and you're not impelling it on anybody else. But remember your relationship with the creator, that you are the creator, and that just as the white buffalo woman taught the Lakota people to pray with ceremonies 19 generations ago, this is what she told them. If you will keep at it, in 19 generations, a white calf will be born, and that is your sign. And here it is. The prophecy is true, and it portends major, good, positive changes this year, leading us to a better relationship with the earth, with each other, and with the Great Spirit.
Wow. I love it. To share with you that I've shared on these programs before. Um, Over the last couple of years here on the Central Coast, we've had some rather heavy rains. Prior to that, we were having some droughts. Okay. And unfortunately, because of the droughts, many of the trees, specifically oak trees, were unable to secure themselves. And so, where I live, where my wife and I live up on the hill above Santa Barbara, there were last year, and then we're talking now 2023, one of the oak trees near our home, far enough away it wasn't endangering us, fell over. All right. This year, another one much further away from us, but still on the property, also fell over. And I left them for a period of time, and realizing that they were not going to recover, obviously, because they were literally lying on the ground and the leaves were dying and so forth, with respect, with honor, and so forth, and thanking them for their contribution to helping us to keep warm over the coming winter, I like to use a turn of a phrase of Elon Musk. It was scheduled, controlled disassembly. Okay. As opposed to one of his rockets that blew up, and he called it an unscheduled explosive disassembly, something like that. Anyway, I have to tell you that one of these days I'm going to get rid of that phrase. I have to tell you, because I don't have to tell you, but I'm going to tell you that I love being out there in the wilderness, and in a matter of fact, it is in what's referred to as the Los Padres National Forest. It's on the fringes.
I know where you are. Yes, it's
And
beautiful.
I'm out there with my battery powered chainsaw cutting up the tree. And again, showing gratitude and so forth. And over the weekend, this past weekend, as of this conversation, the second tree that had fallen, I was able to actually cut up large pieces and drag them over to an area where I refer to it as my processing center. It's closer to the house. I don't have to take the wood in very far. And I was able to move the entire oak tree. And so I was telling my friend who lives on the property as well. I said, I could actually say that I have actually lifted an entire oak tree. It may have been piece by piece, but there's something about being out there. The grasses are tall, and I'm working on cutting those down too, to obviously to minimize fire danger. But there's something for me about being out there. And here's an interesting side note. I was 19 at the time, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I had graduated from high school, but I took a 6-month hiatus before I went back to college. And I went to this one agency, state agency, and they gave me an aptitude test. And at the time, I was shocked at what they came up with from this is your career. Farmer. I understand that better now than ever before. And what I'm doing, we have chickens as well. We have 7 of them. My wife has a greenhouse that I don't step into that realm. That is like, as if a woman who cooks, don't you dare come into my kitchen kind of thing. But I find it fascinating how the universe opens up these different doors. And I suppose I could metaphorically speak of being a farmer doing these programs. But it's a little bit beyond the farming part because I talk about how we set out this giant smorgasbord table of all of the ideas and concepts and philosophies of our different guests. And we ask the listener, the viewer, to come to the table and take what resonates with them. But even more importantly, we ask them to come back after because there may be something that resonates with them now that didn't before. And to me, it's just a fascinating process. Talk to us about your process in terms of how you have grown, especially choosing shamanism as your path, or I don't know, maybe you didn't choose it, or maybe you did in terms of the contract that you signed before you came in. But talk to us about that path that you have been on, and when you were consciously aware that you were on it.
I was given that information. And specifically, I drank ayahuasca. Yeah, there's a whole story with that, but I'll just cut to the chase. I went out of this country for a week, and it was 4 nights back to back ayahuasca. Now, at the time, I have been doing radio and podcasting for 17 years. So that is my great love. Masterclass for me every week. I love it. And that's why I'm still doing it. I have been a book writing coach and also a publicist. I've enjoyed it mostly because of who I get to work with. I get to work with spiritual messengers. Those tend to be the people who hire me as a coach. And so I've been happy. And then I've got also music. I'm a singer. I've been a singer since I'm a little girl. And I love sound and healing, with vibration, with music, with my voice. So beautiful. It's not like I was lacking or wanting anything. And what happened was I went out of the country. I drank ayahuasca. It was 4 nights of ceremony back to back. And starting the first night, now many things happened. There were many healings and sacred geometry and things, lots of downloads, incredible. The first night, the pattern started, the divine, as in feminine, showed up. And she said to me, Debbie, you're a healer, you're a shaman, and you're a priestess. And I had no idea, no context for that information. As far as being a healer, I told her, I am not. I don't even understand why you're saying that. My friends are healers. I've got very gifted healers. Certainly people come on my show and are interviewed are healers. And I didn't resonate. Priestess, okay. And then shaman, I felt, no, that's embarrassing actually, because I know what a shaman goes through, especially the people holding this room right now. And then I told her, and I will never see dead people. And so that was the end of that. She was very gracious. She came back the next night. She said the same thing to me. And she showed me what it was like to see dead people. And wasn't so bad. Third night, she came back and she told me the same thing. And she started working with my hands and showing me how to heal myself, which I did. I had had a migraine and it was gone. She showed me how to work on other people in the room. And I was amazed what was coming out of my hands. And the fourth night, same thing. And towards the end of the ceremony, she told me to go up to the shaman and ask for a shaman blessing. And we went back and forth for 20 minutes. I was uncomfortable. I was embarrassed. I didn't think, some white girl from the United States had any right when these guys, it's taken them 20, 30 years to become who they are. And she would not relent. And I finally acquiesced. I went, and the shaman was beautiful about it. And they gave me a shaman's blessing. I came back to my life. I told a friend and I said, man, that was confusing. And he said, let me give you a hypno session and let's do a past life regression. And I was like, oh gosh, it's never going to work. He's going to try to put me under and tell me to look at my feet. And then I'm not going to see anything. And then I'm going to go in my head and it's going to be awful. So, the universe is beautiful and divine. It was not that at all. And instead, he had a completely different methodology and bam, he put me under. I saw myself definitively, had a whole on experience as myself as a male. I knew where I lived. I knew who I connected with. I knew how I got my food. I know I looked nothing like this, that's for sure. And it was beautiful. And the next session we had, he put me under. And so this is also where extraterrestrials come in. I saw myself as a Mayan priestess. I was over 7 feet tall, and she was an amazing. I was enamored with her and how self-possessed she was and how she had this ability to create unlike anything I'd experienced before.
Mhm.
And I had spent the day with her, and before I left, I asked her, how do you do what you're doing? And she said, I telepathically, she raised her finger and said, I'm not from here. I'm from another galaxy. And that was huge for me.
Mhm.
Okay, there's an aspect of me not from here, and she's a priestess. So it all starts to come together. I did start following the shamanic path. I certainly did musically and singing at ceremonies. And I just felt like I needed to work with people. I began working with a woman here. I live in Burbank. I'm in the San Fernando Valley. And I started working with a woman here in the forest near my house. We would meet once a week and we'd do the most extraordinary sessions. And then I took it further and I wanted to get certified. And so I worked with the Four Winds Society for 6 months and I became certified. It was really intense and a beautiful program. My life changed. Then I went on to do Moonai Key rites. I recently completed animal spirit medicine. I'm about to go on a retreat in a couple of weeks in Colorado with a well-known shaman. And I'm passionate about this. And it has come up numerous times. I even was working with a doctor recently. He was helping me with clearing some physical stuff. And he's never met me, this gentleman. He's a real medical doctor who also does this energy work, and he's phenomenal. And he started working on me and he said, oh, okay, there's 9 shamanic lives. Let me clear that. And I had to stop him. I said, whoa, what did you just say? And he said, yeah, these there's nothing wrong with these lives, amazing lives, but there were aspects of it that are bleeding over right now and creating some of this physical issue. I'm like, this is crazy. And so I could tell you so many synchronistic stories that have come up around shamanism, but that is essentially my path. I do not plan to stop. We have converted our back house rather than renting it out. We've converted it into a healing temple. So I
Mm.
can bring people here privately and also in groups, and people can participate in shamanic healings and some of our music. And I think I'm also going to use it for people to rent it to people as a book writing retreat. When they're trying to write their book, they
Mm.
can come here and rent the space and just be at peace privately. And if they want to add on the coaching, the book coaching with me, they can do that too. So yeah, I feel like this path is constantly unfolding for me.
Very cool. Very cool. I am still working on my book. Been working on it. The I would say that the seeds were planted in 2001 with my first wife. I stand corrected, with my second wife, my present wife, I should say, because I'll never do that again. I'll never go through that process of divorce, which I was enlightened by someone who said, oh, you're being sued. I said, no, I'm going through a divorce. I said, no, no, no. A divorce is a lawsuit. Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Like I really needed to know that. But the book started out, and I've been working on it and trying to, and not trying, but I've been working on it to get it published. And someone just gave me some great advice just the other day about where to go to on the web to get it up on Amazon and so forth. And so I'm going to go through those steps. And I was also told that I needed to, in order to get the thoughts out of my head that I was constantly, well, I guess the correct word is worrying about, make a list. So I started out with 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, and I'm up to 13 items that I want to accomplish. One of them is, of course, to get my book published. And it's based upon my wife's experiences, or I shouldn't say her experiences with going through chemotherapy and cancer treatment back in 2001. It's more about a flyer I created for her that then I plastered all over the house to help her and remind her of the choice that she made. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about in that regard is the choices that we do make and the script that we have written, or contract, whatever metaphor you want to use. How do we go about incorporating these new choices that we are introduced to, such as the ones maybe that folks have heard on this program, on this podcast and videocast, to rewrite, again, whichever metaphor you choose, to rewrite the contract, to rewrite the script? And I guess maybe with a script, it's not so much rewriting it as much as, okay, from this point forward, we're taking that part out and we're putting in something new. How do we begin that process, especially if we're not real happy with the life that we're living right now, which probably is part of that original contract? But it's like, I want to be happy. They told me in that document over there, the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so I want to pursue I want to pursue happiness. I want to be at peace. I want to be content. Even though I've also heard too, Debbie, that it's part of this world that we are faced with these different challenges as we go through our lives. So it's like there's a juxtaposition there. Give us some guidance here, if you can.
It's a beautiful question, and it's probably pertinent to many people watching or listening. And I would say, Richard, all of that, any kind of changing of the narrative or the experience begins with the inner experience. So I think rewiring the nervous system and working energetically on issues is paramount. I know because for instance, when I went through the shaman program, we had to trade all the time with fellow students. And I joined the program to learn shamanic practices, and I got that. But what I ended up also getting, which was a mega bonus, is I completely changed because I was constantly doing these shamanic practices. So specifically, things like there's something called an illumination. It's very beautiful. And illumination literally takes energetically, there's a way to work with your problem. I won't go through the whole process, but I will tell you the person basically lets me know what's going on. I have them pick what's called a kuya, which is one of my very cured stones in my mesa, my shaman's mesa that I carry around.
Mm-hmm.
And they pick one that they resonate with. And then I find out what's happening in their body and where it's happening, where the blockage is. And the stone goes there, but then I do all sorts of energy work over them. And then I rebalance the entire body. Many people, you could say they pass out, meaning they go into the deepest, best sleep of their lives. They can't remember sleeping that well. And some people say, well, I wasn't sleeping, but I wasn't awake. It was like the most amazing trance. And then we come back. And what I like to say to people is, this is the way it should be all the time, because they're in a completely different state. From that state is where all creation is possible, because you've been neutralized, had this great healing. For some people, it's deeper. I would do an extraction. But, by the way, I get information from somebody when I work on them. So in advance, I wouldn't ever tell someone, come in for this. I'd say, just come in, let's talk, tell me what's going on. And then their being, their soul, their energy will literally speak to me and say what's needed. And of course, we can do different things in different sessions. But there is an extraction, and that could mean that there is something very specific to this life or a past life or a multidimensional life that has been embedded energetically inside of them and is creating blockage. And in that case, I have my techniques to not only release that completely, transform it, into the light, but also to put back into that space in their whole being, like this just complete energetic healing. It's so beautiful. And finally, there are soul retrievals. So again, if something very specific to the way someone's sharing with me, and it is revealed while I do some tracking that a soul retrieval is best, then I go into the underworld on the client's behalf. And I find out what happened and when, where was a trauma created. It's usually in this life that the trauma was so great that there was a split between who they are right now and that piece of them that went off and froze somewhere and never grew with the rest of the being because it was so traumatized. And so I find what that is. I find why that happened. And then I find out what is this person's gift. And then I also find their power animal, the one that wants to come back from the underworld, that has come up to say, I am going to be with them now on the path to heal them further and to work with them. So we come back and we do a lot of work with the pieces I find. And that is a phenomenal, phenomenal process as well. And then there's decoupling. And some people just need a decoupling. And what that means is they're in fight, flight, or freeze. Right. And you can't create from there. You can't change any narrative or reality. You're just going to perpetuate over and over. And so I would do a decoupling and have them just come back into their heart, back in their body, back in their sacral. And that is also to deeply connect with Mother Earth. Most of these sessions, people lay there after we talk and receive. I do all the energy work. But when they come back, like I said, they are completely different. And I can tell you, if you do, this once a week, for example, you'll be completely different within a couple of months. It's unbelievable, the changes, because now your system has been rewired. And there is peace, there is calm, this presence. There is nothing to run from or run to. And in that space is where we can choose and create anything.
In my 20s and 30s, I went through several personal growth and development programs, starting with LifeSpring, which was an outgrowth of EST. Great experience. No, I did not join the organization, but I learned an awful lot. And one of the things that was so fascinating for me about these experiences was the resistance on day one of these 5-day intensives, the grumblings by the people that were there, and how they would grumble about how they didn't want to be there. I don't need this. I da 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 da. And the facilitator, hearing all of this, and of course it's not the first time, so they were prepared. They stopped and they said, "Okay, I hear a lot of you are not wanting to be here. I have some, well, you might think it's bad news for you. You do want to be here. Because if you didn't want to be here, you wouldn't be. And so wherever we happen to be in our lives, Debbie, obviously that's where we want to be, or we'd be someplace else. It seems to me that there's a certain element of acceptance in order to choose to be somewhere else. And that, I think, takes probably a great deal of I guess, introspection, but maybe maturity, insight into self. And isn't that the element that we need to learn about more than anything else? Is, because you referred to this earlier about going within, listening, that we need to not only learn about, but recognize and acknowledge and accept the good, the bad, and the ugly about ourselves. And that's not to say, that's not passing judgment on any of it. It's just saying that's who I am. And to have regrets is to say, and I want to change something. Well, first of all, you can't. You can't change those elements because if you did, you wouldn't be who you are. How do we, in terms of what you've just described, that's part of the process, isn't it? Of recognizing and accepting and being at peace with who you are and where you are so that you then can change where you are and who you are.
Mm. Absolutely. I am working right now with a client on this very thing, although it's not, there are internal issues, but I'll describe more deeply. So, this person has a lot of physical challenges right now, and it's overwhelming. Um, Really debilitating arthritis, like painful.
Mm-hmm.
And every time she thinks, oh, okay, I have this nipped, she'll go to the doctor and find out through an x-ray because, oh, okay, now my hand hurts. It's like, oh my God, now it's in the hands and the shoulder and the knees. And I had, hip replacement surgery. And is this ever going to end? And she's being treated for a little bit of skin cancer and understandably, to live in any kind of pain and limitation, constant physical distress is very difficult, really not good, because that's a lot of inflammation. And anybody who follows longevity and anti-aging knows that inflammation is a precursor to dying, to cancer, to diabetes, and to an early death. So this is important stuff. And she's uncomfortable most of the time. And the big aha came with, you can't hate yourself into wellness.
Mm.
And what I meant was this constant frustration and resentment and why me and no, she's not a whiner, by the way, at all. But she's been pissed about this going on.
Yeah.
And then every time, going to the doctor, another piece, another piece. And so the work has been around. Can you love all of it exactly as it is? Literally talk to the bones throughout the day, and especially when you get into bed to go to sleep, when your head hits a pillow, there's always a period of time before you drift off. And so to talk to herself is my coaching to say, wow, Bones, I love you. I love you exactly as you are. And I have so much compassion for you, for what you must be going through in some areas of my body, bone on bone, with not a lot in between. And skin, I love you. And I'm sorry for all the sun I gave you that I probably, when I was younger, should have put something on my face or head. And I love you. And you're going to be okay. And just to pour white golden light in there and imagine the possibilities. It's like another client I have who's upset about his weight and feels like he's tried everything. And I said, yeah, you've tried everything, but the one thing you haven't tried is to stop hating yourself as you are, because you cannot hate yourself thin. You have to come to acceptance first. Okay, this is what I look like. This is the number on the scale. This is my girth right now and the size I'm wearing and the discomfort I feel in carrying this around. Not healthy for me. I get it. But what would happen if I loved myself so much? And to come from that, I think, is the greatest game changer.
But isn't part of the problem though that our society has set us up, in a manner of speaking, to think that loving self is a bad thing. It's and that no, you don't want you need to be, I mean, especially with a lot of the philosophies that are out there, whether it's Judaism or Catholicism, and where they promote sacrifice and guilt. And again, I can say that because I was born and raised a Catholic. Okay. But isn't that part of the problem we've got in our society here in America in particular, but it's certainly global, that no, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 you don't want to love yourself. That's the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah, because it bleeds over and people get confused. I think if somebody is a selfish narcissist, yeah, that needs to be dealt with. It's not fun to be around. It has terrible impact on other people. And it's not pretty, right? To hear someone who's so into self, that's back to that duality we were talking about earlier, that has to do with some of the DNA we have. So, yes, that is really unattractive qualities. But if you've ever been around someone who really loves and believes in themselves, man, there's nothing hotter than that on the planet. It is so attractive. And it's the kind of person you think immediately, I want to work with them. I want to date them. I want to be friends with them. Like everyone's attracted to them. And if you're
Mhm.
not, then look at, shadow work, like
Mhm.
what kind of
Mhm.
projections going on there? Because I mean, only in a healthy terms.
Right.
If somebody really has that level of self-love and confidence, then emulate them. What is going on in you that isn't creating that, and then heal that, work on that. So I think there's a lot of disparity between those two aspects. One is not cool and is not attractive, and the other, which is real self-worth.
Yeah.
That is something I think we should all aspire to.
I find, and I learned about this early on by observing other people, and the concept of, again, this is part of the unattractive aspect of it, the self-deprecation. Uh, no matter what they say about themselves, it's always negative. It's always putting themselves down. I even heard one gentleman. I was working in the control room, and he was in the studio recording his news. And every so often, I heard these yells and screams and hollers because he was making a mistake in the script, and you MF, you stupid, did it. And I'm going, and yet in conversations that I would have with this person, they seemed so enlightened. And I'm going, wait a minute. And that's why I really, first of all, I have never, at least to my best of my recollection, I have never spoken derogatorily or deprecatingly, I guess is the right way to put it, of my wife, either my first or my present wife. Even going through the divorce, wasn't happy, but she was doing the things that she was here to do, as I was here to do the things I was here to do. And I've always wanted and worked to be supportive of both. My brother and I, we're on opposite ends of the political spectrum. However, he's still my brother. I still love him. He isn't wrong, and neither am I. We just have differing views on this material world, different aspects thereof. I mean, even in the conversation that we had, we actually, when we came to the end of our conversation, we both agreed that there were three things that needed to be dealt with. We may not have agreed on how, but we agreed that these needed to be dealt with. Hey, common ground. Hello. I don't need to disown him. Um, it's one of those aspects too that I see in movies and television programs about uh um relationships, and the stereotypes of the men of men and women, and I remember this one, I wish I could remember the title of the show, where they were always trying to get one up on the other. It was done with humor and laughter and all of this kind of stuff. And I'm going, that's not how that works. I don't remember ever seeing that with my parents, who, by the way, lived. My mother's still alive. She's 90. My father passed last year. And um, first of all, I don't recall them ever fighting, maybe having a conversation that they were trying to figure something out. I don't remember them ever arguing, at least not in front of us. Um, and they never were trying to get one up on the other. And I think this epitomizes it. I interviewed them on this show, on this program in 2015. And my mother made the comment that she had his back, and she knew he had hers. And that apparently early on in their relationship, in their marriage, with the people that they associated with, when they were separated, for example, his friends and so forth would say certain things about her, and vice versa. Her friends would say certain things about him. And they had both made this wonderful agreement that they would never, ever go off on some tangent with that information until they checked with the other. So there was this unity within that relationship that lasted until my father's passing. And even in non-intimate relationships, we still have that crazy dynamic. It seems to me that, and you mentioned this earlier too about the phases that we've gone through. And back in the 80s, it was victimhood. The personal growth programs I went through, it was victimhood. It's my parents' fault that I am the way that I am. No, it's not. And then we went through the phase of codependency. And then we made it into interdependency. We realized that we're connected and that we work off of each other. We affect one another. And then in 2015, June, we went back to victimhood. And I said, no, I'm not playing this game anymore. It is not someone else's fault that we are where we are as a country. We did whatever it is you think is the problem. We did it to ourselves. Is there a recognition from your experience and the work that you do that maybe we're starting to get the message that it's always been um it's always been about us in terms of, it's always been, I know this is a dirty word, our responsibility. It's like the old adage of being pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. You're not sorta pregnant, 50% pregnant. You either are or you aren't. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's fascinating. And I do think responsibility is everything. I mean, it's the ability to respond, right? It's the ability, instead of looking outside of oneself where you can affect no change except to blame, and looking inside yourself and saying, what is possible to do different here? Because there's one thing in common in any party I go to, and that is me. I'm there. And so I'm having my experience of reality. And I
Yeah.
just want to hear at the end, harken back to something you said earlier,
Okay.
because I think this ties in, Richard. In the very beginning, you said that we both agreed we're not into these dark conspiracy theories. And here's my question about that, which ties into what you just said. If we are metaphysicians, right, one of the first premises we are taught is we create our reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reality, how's that created? There's a thought. We think that thought so much it becomes a belief that's pretty firm. And that belief over and over, like a movie projector, creates our reality. You want to change it, go backwards and go to the inception of whatever that thought was and discreate it. I do believe it has to be discreated first, and then create what you prefer instead. And if we are truly metaphysicians, then putting energy into dark conspiracy theories, what is it going to create?
Mm-hmm.
Only more of the same, more, oh, these people did this and that happened, and these kind of alien races, and what they're funneling, and islands. And I mean, I could really go deep with it because of the things I've heard. And some of them, it is like people living this mental horror story. I wouldn't want to do that to myself. I focus, and it's not about not acknowledging that stuff. I want to also confirm something you said earlier, again at the beginning of the show, Richard, when you were saying, hey, they're advanced races. And exactly, if they're advanced races, benevolent races, not all of them, but a lot of them,
Mm-hmm.
then if they wanted to wipe us out or eat us, things we would do as humans that we're just projecting on them, they would have done it a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So they haven't done it, right? And I also believe strongly, because I've heard it enough over and over, that there are ships, whether we see them or not, in space that their purpose is to watch over Earth. And so when
Mm-hmm.
something not benevolent or dark comes along, believe me, they are protecting us. And they're also very patiently waiting till we get our act together so they can come meet us face to
Yeah.
face, so to speak. So all of this is, yes, we create our reality. Yes, we are ultimately responsible for ourselves, for our relationships, for our situations, for our jobs, for the country, for the world we live on in. And so rather than get overwhelmed by that fact, is just start with the thing you can, which is you. Start doing the inner work,
Mm-hmm.
the journey from the head where we've been living in a very masculinized society to the heart, the feminine, which is the balance we now need. That's
Mm-hmm.
the longest journey many of us will take. Looking at our shadow and our projections, ouch, we don't want to believe those things about ourselves, but that's where the real ownership and healing comes. And that ripple effect goes out. Every time we heal, we create phenomenal healing in every aspect of our lives, and then that ripple continues out.
That must have been part of my contractual agreement to be born into a family with four sisters and only one brother, so that I would have that heart connection in that respect. And I hope others will learn to do that. I want to thank you so much, Debbi Dachinger, for joining us here on the program and sharing your insights. I'd love to have you back again to continue this conversation. I just find all of this fascinating, as you do. I'm excited about the prospects of the future. I loved what one gentleman we were talking about choices, and how they say that all of the choices that you've made up to this point have brought you where you are. I mean, and I think about that and go, wow, you mean that the choices I made even as a kid, as a little boy, have brought me here right now talking with Debbi Dachinger? Yeah. Now, it seems a little far-fetched, but then you go on with that. So all the choices you're going to make now, they're going to determine where you're going to be in the future. And I loved what one of my guests said. He says, yes, that's true. However, think about this. All of the choices that you're going to make from this point forward, because we want to deal with the present, are going to be based upon your perception of what you think the future is going to be. Now, I am not a prepper. I am not a believer in the philosophy that teaches about Armageddon and the end of the world and all of that stuff. I'm not. And I'm not going to dig a hole in the ground and hide. I'll tell you what, if, let's just say for the sake of argument, if this were going to happen and all of the bombs were going to be launched, I want to be at ground zero. I do not want to be a survivor. I want to be at ground zero to be taken out, and I'll start over because we're going to need all the help we can get starting over. I'm an optimist. I always have been, in spite of all of the challenges that I've been through in my life and all of the different things that have happened. I still agree. And I can't remember if it was Stephen Hawking or Einstein or, who was the fellow with Cosmos, who did Cosmos in the 80s, 70s, and
Carl
80s?
Sagan?
Thank you. Who said that the universe is a friendly place. I believe that. I really believe that. And I'm hoping that we get that across to folks. So I thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for the great work you do too. I've really enjoyed this.
I do have three final questions I ask all of my guests. Surprise, surprise. But before I do that, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., and then Wednesdays from 9 to 10 a.m. That's our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. 9 programs, 9 topics, 9 guests, 9 different conversations that we hope you will tune into, because we stream live at those times at richarddugan.com. We're also podcasting these at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And we're on YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. We hope you'll subscribe and click notifications so that the next time I post another conversation, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in and listen. We also ask that if you can support the work we're doing financially, we have a PayPal account. It's there for your security as well as ours. When they ask for the email address to whom you're sending, richard@richarddugan.com. That's richard@richarddugan.com. And probably the most important element, if you can take time during this, the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, spend some time going within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place, listening to that still small voice. I hope you'll take time to do that. I do it when I'm out there working with nature. Try to listen very carefully. There are times when it says, you're done for the day. Go ahead and go in, because this will be here tomorrow when you come back. With all of that being said, we move to our 3 questions we ask all of our guests, and we always thank our guests. I thank you so much for being with us. And the first of those 3 questions is, who is Debbi Dachinger?
She's a fierce mama. She's resilient, and she is ever growing, ever changing, really committed to growth, inner growth and healing, and brave. I would say very brave, and a real creative being, and a great podcaster and coach.
Mm. What is it that gets you up in the morning?
Oh, so much, but mostly my dog. Because she needs to be fed and she needs to be walked. And I have to say, I'm really fortunate, because she's very outgoing, and she is just always happy, literally always happy and always full of joy. She's a cockapoo. And so little Shelby gets me out of bed every day, and she makes me so happy to get out of bed.
And finally, what was your best day?
Oh, I've had so many. Okay. So, but I'll tell you about a recent one. And I also want to let folks know, if they want to reach me, I'm sure it's in the show notes. You can go to DebbiDachinger.com or YouTube.com/Debbi Dachinger. And my best day, so recently, I was flown out to Colorado to be interviewed on George Norrie's Beyond Belief Gaia TV show. And, so here's why I say words like brave and courageous and all of that, because there are still things that frighten me. Trust me. There are still things that I have to grow into. And so this was one of them. And I have a lot of background being on stage and being a former actress and singer, but these things sometimes don't prepare you for something this new. And so we were going to be talking about shamanism and extraterrestrials, George and I, and they put me up in this fabulous hotel, and I'm waiting for the driver to pick me up, and it like hits me. Whoa, just the enormity of what I'm about to do. Walk onto a set with lights, having my hair done and my makeup done and all of this, not knowing what the heck George is going to say or how it's going to go. And when that fear, I don't know what else, doubt, whatever it was that came up, or overwhelm about this moment, there's so many directions it could have gone. But Richard, why it was my very best day is that this voice came out of me, and it was the first time that this voice spoke. It was me talking to me and letting me know, if you were here in the flesh in front of me, Debbi, I would hug you and I would tell you how proud I am of you, how much I love you. And that show is going to air soon. It's been 3 months since that day, But the potency of that moment, it changed everything. I was talking to myself in a way you would want any great parent to talk to a child. And in that moment, that's exactly what I required. And when I was done with the show, Richard, and the driver brought me back, and I knew I was going to take myself out for a crazy luxurious dinner, in order to celebrate, I went back to the hotel room and I took out my iPhone and I shot a video. And I've not released that video yet, but it was so raw in the moment. I couldn't even start speaking at the beginning of the video. I just had my hand over my mouth like an oh my God hand
Mm-hmm.
until the words can come and flow to say what had just happened, how amazing it went, how proud I was. It was just this gush of words for me. And I thought, if I never posted on social media, then I have this to look at any moment going forward as a reference point that I truly can do anything. I truly, no matter how out of my comfort zone it is or what kind of doubts I have, we are all built for all of this. We came here at this time to shine our light, to use our voices, to make a difference. There is no accident we're here. And if we're here, we're not done. And so I celebrated myself in that moment so much. And that was probably my best day, to remind myself yet again of how much I was capable of.
Wow. That is very cool. Very cool indeed. Well, I thank you, Debbi Dachinger, for joining us here on the program, and encourage people to go to your website, debbidachinger.com, which we will be linked to. And I look forward to having you back to continue this conversation. This is fun stuff.
I love it. Okay, Richard, who looks like John Travolta. That sounds great. I'll come back.
All right. And I thank you folks for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love Talal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.